what a wonderful thing it is to be able to tell my memories of Mr. Bannowsky, which I will never get over calling him that because he was so far above me. I remember the first time I saw him was he was walking between Hangar 39 and Hangar 40 in Alameda Naval Air Station. I don't even know if I'd got into the flying boats yet, but I asked somebody, I said, who is that guy? And he looked like a movie star, like Robert Taylor, the movie star. He had a movie star looks about him. He had a chest full of medals, and somebody said, well, that's Mr. Bannowsky. Well, I had no idea who Mr. Bannowsky was, and I had no idea that someday he would be my senior aviator on a big flying boat. And when I finally got into this VH-5 Air Sea Rescue outfit, why, when I left the States, I went over to Hawaii on an aircraft carrier, and because they wanted to, it was a long flight and they wanted to cut the weight down, and we were in Hilo Harbor, and they were practicing takeoffs and landings in this small harbor. And I remember those planes, they were 3Rs, and they had 2,600 right cyclones, and they weren't quite enough power, and they just barely get off the water and clear the breakwater. But this one plane would get off the water about half of this, and it was the same kind of an airplane. And I was asking somebody, who's flying that? And they said, it's Mr. Bannowsky. So finally I was assigned to an airplane, and sure enough, it was Mr. Bannowsky, who was my senior aviator. So one day I wasn't supposed to be up there, but I went up on the flight deck to see how he'd done that. And I remember so clearly, I wrote about it in a book I wrote about how this man, he just seemed like he was part of that airplane. He'd grab a hold of that yoke and he'd rock it back and forth and reach up on the prop pitch controls and everything and back down again. And finally he just pull back on that yoke, and away we'd go right up into the air. And I just never got over my admiration of the guy, because he flew an airplane, a great big airplane like that, the same way I used to drive cars, just wild, and he liked to see how close he could come to things, and he was a daring guy. And they did a profile on him, and I wish I'd have saved it when we were out in the Marshall Islands. They profiled the pilots, and they did Bannowsky's profile, and come to find out he had started out like I did in the gunnery division on a battleship, and I was in the gunnery division on a heavy cruiser, the Indianapolis. Anyway, he got into aviation and became an enlisted pilot, which they called an AP. Well, we went to our first reunion back in D.C., and he told me, I asked him if he'd ever flown in a PBY, and he said, yeah, that's what I got shot down in. And I said, you got shot down? He says, yeah. He says, I was up in the tower on a radio, and they had a parasol wing on that PBY, and he was up there on the radio, and the Japs came down and shot both the engines out, and the fabric had blown off the top of the wings and everything, and the plane wasn't flyable anymore. So Bannowsky said he climbed down out of there, and one of the commissioned pilots had already left, and the other one had one leg over the side, and so Mr. Bannowsky said, well, I started to follow him, put my harness and my Mae West on, and said I looked back there, and the waist guns and those two enlisted men didn't have any parachutes. So I knew that if I bailed out, they were dead men. Somehow I had to get that airplane down. And he said he put it into a dive and flared it out at the last minute and greased it on. He said that Consolidated Aircraft told him that a Catalina PBY couldn't fly in that kind of condition, but I don't know of anybody else that could have done it but him. Well, I got down on the water, and the Japs came down and strafed the plane, and Bannowsky was bleeding all over the place from the shrapnel, and they got a life raft over the side, got him into the life raft, and the plane sank, and the Japs came down and strafed the life raft. But anyway, he survived that, and he should have gotten a medal for what he did there. I remember one time we were flying over the South Pacific, and this doctor had came along, and he wanted to get up in the bow turret. So Mr. Bannowsky, as I called him in those days, called me and told me to check him out in the bow turret. So I knew had a pretty good idea what was going to happen. So I got up in the deck turret where you could see out between the gull wings, and I left that doctor up there in that bow turret, which was out in front of the pilots actually, and we dropped down just over the top of the water in the lagoon, and I see these palm trees getting closer and closer at the end of the lagoon, and all of a sudden we went up and the wingtip floats just barely missed the treetops. And when that doctor came out of that bow turret, he was shaking like a leaf. But Bannowsky just loved doing things like that. I told about the time when the war ended and we went down and buzzed the surrender ceremonies at Mille Atoll, the first Jap-held island to surrender when the war ended. And we dropped this admiral off down there, and we took off again with Jado to kind of show off, and everybody was showing off that day. You could get away with almost anything, and all these fighter planes were coming down and buzzing the surrender ceremonies. And Bannowsky got on the intercom and he told all of us guys that had headphones on, he says, "Hang on," he said, "we're going to show them a real buzz job." So down we went. And I went up into the deck turret where I could look out through the gull wings, between the gull wings and out between the twin tails. And when we went into a dive and we pulled out, we kept settling, of course, and when we went by the flag where they're having the surrender ceremonies, where we left a trail of dust from the coral atoll, and I swear I had to look up to see the flag. We were that close to the runway. So, but we got away with it because the war was over. I said, well, anyway, I've been so thrilled over these years to be able to contact C.J. Bannowsky occasionally, and I'm so proud that he even would want to talk to me, because it's after all these years I'm still in awe of the man. And I just want to wish you a happy birthday, Mr. Bannowsky, and I'm so sorry that I can't come back there, but my health is kind of haywire right now, and I got a doctor's appointment coming up, and I can't possibly make it back there, but I would sure like to be there. And so, happy birthday to a great guy.